we make fun of that. Turn a Don sack into 100 pack. I ain't sell no crack.
This is a classic.
First off, bitch, I'm first up. First off, bitch, I'm first up. First off, bitch, I'm first up. First off, bitch, I'm first up.
You are now listening to a Bobby Johnson beat.
First off, bitch, I'm first up.
First off, who the fuck stopping me, nigga? Ain't no one topping me, nigga, unless it's your shawty on top of me, nigga. Make pussy pop like my trigger, I'm triggered that niggas be jocking me, nigga. You cannot copy a nigga, I switch up the flow and I drop on these niggas. Mop when I put the red dot on these niggas. Mop when I put the red dot on their head. Come get your kid for a feeling with.
Bam. We are live. Let's fucking go. So, to give just a little bit of context, I had this podcast playing in the background as I was like organizing my room. Alex Hormozi with Jack Neal. And he was spinning some bars. I was like, yo, I gotta put this on stream. You know? Because he was spinning some facts right now. I was only like 8 minutes deep, but...
Today's guest runs a portfolio of companies that generates him $700,000 a day.
Don't analyze your fuel. If you need to use revenge as your fuel to become successful, which you want, then use it.
Raised to chase the corporate dream, he found himself lost, stuck in a life that his father had scripted for him.
2025 so far has been the worst year of the last 8 years. At the beginning of the year, I had 8 lawsuits. People want to be like, that's not fair. It's like, well, life isn't fair.
Today, he's rewritten his purpose, educating entrepreneurs around the world and on track to become a billionaire by 40.
What's motivation, right? No one knows. But I can say that it's the equal opposite of deprivation. And so if I wanted to motivate someone to behave in a way different than they normally do, I'd want to deprive them of something.
In this episode, we'll dive into his frameworks on building discipline, the power and potential found in human suffering, and how anyone can achieve absolute freedom. Alex Hormozi, welcome to the Jack Neal podcast.
Thank you for having me. I hope I live up to that introduction.
I would say it's probably pretty likely. A good place to start here, Alex. So in 2008, the editor-in-chief of the Gilman News published a poem called Drowsy.
Okay.
Do you remember this?
Barely.
I'll give you a little bit of it.
Yeah. He just talks about an old poem he had.
I think the point of it is that the past 2 year reports,
a few others in there.
Super deep.
The shooter is,
oh yeah,
he was valedictorian of many years after me.
Really?
Yeah.
After this is when it starts getting interesting. It really starts.
That's
starting to come out with the wisdom.
Apparently just turned out some very sad guys.
Were you valedictorian of your class?
No, I wasn't.
Gotcha. Okay.
I was top 10%.
On hard work, today you preach discipline and consistency, but also sustainability. How do you know if you're working too hard?
Let me guess. And his idea of working too hard doesn't exist.
So, too hard's such a hard concept to like I would be like, what does too hard even mean? I think that you have a rate of output that occurs over a period of time, and if the rate of output decreases kind of precipitously at some point, then you know you're not being effective anymore. And so like on a micro level, even hour to hour throughout a day, you know, your output will go down, and then you have to sleep at some point. Then you wake up and then your output goes up again. And so I think like the idea of being burned out, like I don't think anyone's like, people don't burn out when they're playing video games. Not really. I mean, maybe some people, but like for the most part, you can like kind of keep doing it. And I think that burnout just means that the reward for the work that you're doing has either you have habituated to that reward, so you've gotten used to it, so it no longer really rewards you anymore, or the cadence of that reward, which is meaningful, has continued to extend in terms of how frequently you get rewarded, which are both two different ways of basically saying the same thing, which is just you're not getting out of it what you wanted to get out of it. And so I think that is when people, quote, get burned out. I don't think it has anything to do with the amount of work that you're doing.
My prediction was correct. Working too hard does not exist in this.
So I think
mind, really.
it's about what's happening around you while you're working rather than the work itself. Because there are I like looking at things across like many thousands of years. And so even the idea of a 40-hour work week is a pretty modern invention. And if you look at, you know, even a few hundred years ago, people just worked every day. And it wasn't like, oh my God, that guy's so hardcore. It's just like he just worked every day because that was just kind of the expectation, and you just like had to live and had to survive. And if he had enough to eat for a day off, he could probably do that if he wanted to. And so I think about that a lot, which is like a lot of these confines are self-inflicted, and
Exactly.
I think laddering up the belief set too.
I think it's hitting on something very important there. Essentially saying you're in control of what you do every day. If you think it's a prison, you kind of put yourself there, realistically.
Like, does this serve me? And so the idea of like, you know, how do you develop work ethic? I think the big thing is like, it's not really developing work ethic. It's doing the things that you have been rewarded for doing in the past and removing things that you don't enjoy as much. And then it gets easier to do more because you enjoy doing the thing you're doing. Now, let me be clear. I don't like, there's overhead. Of course, there's things that I do that I don't enjoy doing, but
Of course.
there's food that
Everybody.
you eat that you don't
can't avoid
immediately
that.
like, but maybe you like dessert, and that's something like, so it's really just like, again, it's a cadence of reinforcement. It's like, how many times am I being reinforced over a period of time? And maybe, if anything, the thing that gets developed is that you develop a history of being rewarded for delaying gratification over a period of time.
Right.
But,
You train your brain to do that.
you know, it's like,
That's what parents do with their little kids, right? Their little kids want chocolate all the time. And the parents are like, no, first you have to do these tasks and then you can probably earn the thing. They're building that neurological pathway into the child, right? That's essentially what they're doing.
it's like, it's weird. Like I get a lot of, I mean, even like the intro that you gave, it's like, I get a lot of press, if you could call it that, or like flowers for having, you know, huge work ethic, but like, it just doesn't feel, and it isn't like, oh, I do what I love. I'm miserable all the time. Like, it's like, there's plenty of times I'm miserable for extended periods of time. I just like, don't really know what else I would do. And so work is just kind of like my default setting. And
That's
so
crazy.
people are like, oh my God, that guy works 7 days a week on end. And it's like, yeah, but it's like,
If you think about it, I don't think most people would want to have Alex Hormozi's life, you know?
so have many people. I'll give you a different frame to like contextualize this. So, so we have a team here, we have an advisory practice, and, you know, for the team to spend all day with clients in person, it's like, oh my God, this is exhausting, and we have to present and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, I mean, teachers present in front of groups all day, every day, all the
Literally,
time.
all
And
the time.
it's not like a big deal. It's just like, that's just how it is. And so just reframing something that
Damn.
we see as the big thing, as something that somebody else in a different context does all the time, is probably the most regular practice that I do, which is
So mental reframing of tasks. I mean, that's understandable, yeah.
like, how can I, in what universe would this not be hard? In what universe would this be normal? And well, then I'll just live in that universe.
Isn't that called like a form of delusion, though? He's selectively creating his reality to fit the narratives he's okay with. Is that a form of delusion?
Makes sense?
I don't think I'm smart enough to determine that.
I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, Nina just built.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I think about it.
I guess to go off what you're saying, I think it's common sentiment preached online, like I wake up at 4, stop working at 10 p.m.
Sure.
And I guess what I'm curious is, it seems like you believe that people have throughout
hustle
history
culture
worked for
is pushed quite heavily. That is a fact.
extended periods of time, but is that on mentally strenuous tasks necessarily? Because I think of this podcast, for instance, and you might get diminishing returns, but if I recorded 10 podcasts in a day or 20 podcasts in a day, I'm probably going to do it differently than how I would do it if I were doing one in a day. You might put different
what's
types of
going on?
energy.
Movies,
it might
hobbies?
be more passive.
Yellow.
You might be a
What's
little
going on
less
with you?
active
How you doing?
listening. So do you believe that you can still build that muscle of working for like mentally strenuous tasks?
Absolutely.
That's right.
No
Like and
question.
subscribe. That's what I'm talking about. Appreciate the love.
No hesitation.
Good night. Damn, where you from, bro?
Absolutely.
This
Even for
morning over
writing,
here.
like you've like gone like 16 hours.
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
And do you have any advice for building that metric?
Doing it more. Like, I mean, that 100%.
Man, did you catch the response? Jack Neal was like, oh, appreciate the subscription. That's sick. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I appreciate the love. But this man's response is legendary. You know, just do more work. That's it. I'm
It's
telling
repetition. It's
you.
volume.
He does not
like
understand the
what you
concept
just
of
like
working too hard.
fundamentally.
He's
If
just a
we if we
machine.
describe a behavior set within a given condition, then it's a skill that we can
What
develop.
is that, a light bulb?
And we develop skills through modeling, and we develop through role
What does that
playing
mean?
with other, basically seeing
like
what
a
other people
secret
do
code or
and then doing it ourselves. And so, like, doesn't matter what you're trying to learn. If you like, And it's just that there are some skills that people think reading, people think math, people think like public speaking, like these are all skills. But it's like, in what way does podcasting not fall into that category? In what way does having a conversation not fall into that category? Of course it does.
Of course it does. Everything is a
And
skill.
so I don't see it as any different. The only thing is that you want to have some sort of feedback loop so you can make it even better. But even just the fact of just like after every podcast, if you had 5 minutes, you're like, okay, what did I do well?
So Alex essentially is a systems guy. You can tell by the way he's speaking. He's like very like, okay, what's the workflow? How do we optimize it? Yeah, he's very in love with systems. You can tell. I mean, that makes sense. You want to be efficient with the way you accomplish your tasks. It's understandable.
What can I do better? And then,
like, especially for an entrepreneur of his category, right? Absolute titan in all these industries.
the next day, reviewing all the podcasts and then doing it again, like eventually you would no longer get fatigued from it, because you'd also, again, you'd habituate. And so for that one podcast, if you only do one a month, you're probably gonna have, your adrenals will dump while you're having the podcast. You have, anxiety, your heart rate goes up, you start sweating. But if you do it all the time, then it no longer creates an adrenal response because you were just accustomed to doing it. And so, I mean, my goal is just to go through the habituation cycle as fast as humanly possible. So I just get used to it.
Okay.
But like, I'll do a consulting day for 12 straight hours. And I'm pretty fresh at the end. I enjoy doing it. I like doing it. And so, and I'm not saying.
And here's the thing, being delusional to that degree, if that's what that's what I'm calling it, right? This is how I frame it for myself. It's probably not a form of delusion, but that's how I see it. If you're delusional to that degree, your body believes it, your mind believes it, that is how you're going to react. Because we all seen the placebo studies. If you believe something is going to happen, most likely your body reacts appropriately and does that task. It's insane, right? So you can trick yourself and just be a beast like this guy.
That's how I've always been. It's just like, I've done it over time. And, answering questions even ad hoc, it's like, how can you answer questions? It's like, well,
just answer them.
I'll tell you two different stories. So when I gave my first public speech, that wasn't in high school. When I was in high school, I was really nervous because I didn't know the subject matter that well, because it was, Civil War, whatever, right? Or, pro or con, affirmative action, whatever. You have to make some debate. Fast forward, I get on stage. My first stage I ever spoke on as a business person had 1,200 people in the audience. First stage ever. And I remember as I was walking up on stage, I was like, why am I not nervous right now? It was like very weird. I was like, I should be nervous. Why am I not nervous? I've been nervous all the other times I've spoken. And so I thought about it, and it was, I have been doing 8 public speaking things a day for years, because at my gym, I had a microphone, same headset, big speakers that I could hear myself on. And I had a bunch of adults in a room that I had to tell what to do. And I did that every single hour on the hour, 8 hours a day. And then I still ran the business on top of that. And so I'd done that for years. And so when I got up on stage, I was like, oh, I'm just telling another group of people while I have a headset on about something that I already know about. And so that was kind of the making, where you start to have, domain generalizations. Like, okay.
Now look at his social media career. It's been quite successful so far, right? And it's basically the same thing. He's just talking to a mass group of people, but now he doesn't even have to be in front of them. That's crazy.
Something I did here also applies over here, and so it doesn't need to be a big deal. And so that kind of pattern recognition of like, what other time have I done something like this that it wasn't a big deal? Why can't I just use that as the frame of reference for how I'm going to think about what I'm doing right now?
Did you lose a lot of money sports betting on DraftKings or FanDuel?
That's a really good answer.
Thanks.
You kind of have this philosophy of people like to do things that they're good at, right? Mm-hmm. And that kind of comes from building volume over time.
Yeah.
Is it your belief that most people know what they're good at?
No. Well, I'll say this.
That they're good at, right? Mm-hmm. And you kind of have this philosophy of people like to do things that they're good at, right? Mm-hmm. And that kind of comes from building volume over time.
Yeah.
Is it your belief that most people know what they're good at?
No.
That's difficult to determine.
I'll say this. You do what you have been rewarded for doing in the past. And that is kind of like my North Star of everything. And that's basically the behaviorist view of the world, which is people do what they've been rewarded for doing in the past. So, quote, bad people just behave that way because they've been rewarded for behaving in a, quote, bad way in the past. And so they do it. And if they've been punished for doing that, and punish doesn't mean from an outside source, it's just something happened that they didn't want to have happen, an aversive stimulus. And so they would stop doing that, right? And the difficulty is attribution around the skill. So it's basically, where's the causal relationship coming from? And typically people will look at what happened before something, like what's the trigger, and that people use that word. But the trigger is false. It's really, the trigger is just the circumstance that gets created that repeats a behavior you've done in the past that you've been rewarded for. And so I gave this example when I was talking to Graham, but I'll bring it up because I think it's useful. It's like, Layla and I would get into some sort of spat about something, whatever. And I realized that I wouldn't get into a spat, but like if she was crying about something, and it didn't have to be related to me, but she could just be crying for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. I realized that I tended to get angry when she would cry. And she was like, why do you get angry at me when I'm crying? And I would get angry, and then she would stop crying, because then she would get defensive, but the crying would stop. And so she inadvertently rewarded me for getting angry at her in the condition of her crying. So the trigger for me getting angry is her crying. Is it? Or is it the fact that when I have gotten angry in the past, she stopped? And so like, okay, well, why did you get angry the first time? Because that would be the key question. And so what ends up happening is that if you encounter an obstacle that you don't know how to overcome.
I mean, fuck, that's a hell of an example, but I mean, he's not wrong. Shit.
You do basically something called an extinction burst, which is a series of different behaviors to try and elicit the desired result. And so the easiest way of thinking about this is like a 4-year-old kid who's at a candy, the candy aisle right before they check out, and they say, I want a candy. And so the first thing they'll do is say, Mom, I want a candy. And then the mom says no. And then the child changes behavior and says, please, pretty please, blah, 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 blah. They beg. That doesn't work. So then they shout and scream. And so all they're doing is basically flipping through the cards of behavior. They don't do this consciously, but they're just flipping through the cards of behavior until one of them gets them what they want. And so then when a parent has a child, for example, that has tantrums repeatedly, it means that at some point earlier on, they had a tantrum and then they got what they wanted. Mm-hmm. And so what you did is you rewarded tantrum having.
Yes, this is why parents should not reward the crying and the whining their little fucking babies do. I mean, newborn babies is different. They need fucking milk and change diapers. But like toddlers, right? It's like, dude, they're little demons. You got to watch out with them.
Rather than rewarding,
and you're raising like a little fucking
right?
demon.
And so when I think about this with regards to, what was the original question? So I can find my way back
Do most
home.
people know what they're good at?
Yeah. And so the thing is that we have been rewarded for doing things in the past. And so when people are like, why are you the way that you are? I would just say like, I have been rewarded in the past for behaving this way. And so I just continue to seek out those rewards. And so these behaviors have worked for me. And the thing is that these skills generalize across domains. So working hard, for example, it's like if you do something where you have an extended period of time where you have effort before you have a reward and it works out well, then I'm more likely to repeat that behavior in another condition. And so
that is true. Fuck,
do
that is
people
so true.
Are people people are excellent.
Like I think back to my time, so I can tie this into myself, so I can really cement the idea in my head. Before I went to the military, my work ethic was not as strong as it is currently, like at all. Obviously, going through boot camp, that was the whole fucking endeavor. That was cool. You're on basically 24/7 except the weekends. That was cool. You're a little bit more switched on. But then when I really was switched on is when I was working in the horse platoon, the caisson platoon. That was badass. I remember the schedule was from 4:30 in the morning, basically till, realistically, we weren't going home till 1800 sometimes if we were really cleaning everything the way it was supposed to be done. So from 4:30 to like 5 to 6 p.m. That's crazy, bro. And I would do that for weeks on end, for like months. There would be weeks where I would have a break and it wasn't that intense. Like I'm exaggerating a little bit. Like I think maybe at most I had that schedule for a month, but still that's a whole month of being switched on. And in between that month, I also had CQ duties. That's where you're working 24 hours nonstop. You get the next day off, but like your sleep schedule's fucked and everything, right? And you still have to prepare for yourself for the next day because you start to show up the next day squared away, ready to fucking rock and roll. It's no joke. It's no joke.
Excellent at Netflix and chilling. People are excellent at delaying tasks. People are excellent at avoiding confrontation. Why? Because they've been rewarded for doing so. And the problem with it is that there's multiple different types of reward that happen over different timelines. And if this sounds complex, it's like that's why it's a whole field of study. But basically, you have latency is the biggest confounder for a causal relationship around a behavior. Meaning,
YouTube Premium is
No.
ad-free YouTube and
This
background play, so you can watch videos.
Facebook can addict you because there's a little light that turns red, but it's immediate. So they will better addict people to Facebook by giving that dot immediately than saying, I'll give you $1 in 30 days.
Oh, because immediate
Now,
rewards.
the people who have been
They're trying to
rewarded in the
hijack
past
the
for,
dopamine
for
system.
waiting over a period of time after working would
That
do
makes
better
sense.
with the delayed reward. But most people don't have that kind of reward cycle. They've never done anything for a long period of time. And so I think the laddered up question is like, how do you get people to just try that first time where they're just willing to push out when they get rewarded for the work they're putting in? And the answer is, I don't know. I think at some point people call it chance, call it, they read some article and they decide to actually try something for an extended period of time. But I guess I would reject the original premise of the question, which is I think many people are good at many things. They're just not good at the things they want to be good at.
I think it's important to keep in mind, back in the day, you had no choice but to do that. You had to delay gratification because that's how reality was set up. You had to put in crops and feed the crops and take care of the crops, and while taking care of your family and the sheep and all this other stuff, where eventually it would be fruitful. Nowadays, everything is immediate. You need food, you get it, DoorDash or whatever. There's no real struggle, so our brains aren't wired to understand waiting for a reward as much as it used to, which is a problem. And now you, like he said, you have to consciously now seek the delayed gratification, where it's like, that wasn't the case back in the day. You just had to go through it.
I guess to get more specific, how can people identify their competitive edge? Because an example I think of with your content, for instance, you run like a big media channel, and if you're posting, let's say you're looking at results and you think, well, motivational content seems to be doing well. Let's push out more motivational content. But it's not like, maybe you don't consider, and I'm assuming you do, that maybe it does well because Alex has a nice soothing voice. Maybe it's because the visual hook is the way the set looks. A lot of people don't consider like the multiplicity of factors. Like, how can you get better at identifying those things?
I mean, how do you figure out what you're good at?
Yeah, because there's volume and then there's also reflection on the volume. And how do you get better at the reflection portion?
Yeah, so it's volume times feedback loops. So if you think about skill acquisition in general, now this is relatively well documented, but like you do if I want to learn any new skill, so rather than saying like, what am I good at? I think it's sometimes more valuable to say like, what do I want to get good at? Now, people have quote proclivities, or they're like, oh, I'm naturally predisposed to these things. Maybe, but you can't control your genetics, and maybe you don't know. And maybe it was just a nurture thing that earlier on. I remember I had this, and I will loop around to the answer, but I was in college, and one of my favorite professors, he taught a class called systematic inquiry, which is basically like, how do you ask questions and answer them, which is great. And he's a super nurture over nature guy in terms of like his thought process around the world. And I tend to skew more towards the nurture side as well. And he said, like, all the things that you guys think you're naturally good at, you're not naturally good at, you just got good at them earlier. And so I was like, I've always been really good at languages. And I was like, I feel like that's something. And he just looked at me and he was like, I mean, do you have a parent that speaks another language, or there's someone in your life? And I was like, oh yeah, both my parents are bilingual, and I spoke French as my first language. And he was like, why are we even talking? And it was like it felt so, because I didn't see I was like, it was so natural to me that I didn't even think about it. But the very first, my existence was two languages.
Exactly.
And so incorporating third, or even seeing English differently, was something that, quote, came natural to me. But it was just like, I had a different skill set that was repeated earlier on. And so to the original question in terms of skill acquisition, it's like you have a volume of activity that you're doing. So if I want to learn how to, play the trumpet, it'd be like, I'm going to play the trumpet for an hour, and then I'm going to look at other people who play the trumpet and compare what my notes sound like to compare what their notes sound like. And the fastest way to do that is to have an expert tutor. Like, I'm a huge fan of tutoring. It is the fastest way to learn. The second fastest is in small groups, and the third is to join a community of people who already have the same skill, and then you can basically learn through osmosis. And when I say learn through osmosis, it's just learn through observation of the small skills and skills that they do on a regular basis that increase the likelihood they get what they want.
Yeah.
But I'll say one thing, if you want to learn something, whatever it is, the fastest thing to do is go into a community of people who already know how to do that thing well. It's bar none, fastest thing. You'll get many different feedback loops from many
That
different
just makes
sources.
sense, honestly.
You'll be able to tease out what are the few truths rather than the mysticism that's kind of associated with the whole space, because every space has mysticism around it and magic, but there's usually a few core truths that are always true amongst all people for the skill.
That makes a lot of sense.
We're going skills. We're going, we're going super amorphous.
On the reward portion you were speaking about, the ability to kind of wait before you get the result.
I like this.
How do you decide?
This man just laying on the table, chilling. Jesus Christ.
Opportunity is worth 10 years of your time.
I think even in asking the question, it's a question that I probably wouldn't ask. And so maybe there is some outcome that would be material, but immediately I go to, what would my days look like? And I tend to reverse from that. So it's like, if an opportunity, like, how would I determine that an opportunity is worth doing? Well, maybe there's many different big opportunities that exist, but which is the one that has the most days in a row that I would like to live? And then I'll pursue that one, because I think the likelihood that I stick with it is pretty high if I like what I'm doing every day.
Yeah.
That's a great framework. And how could people
I mean, just
maybe
look at
know
the way
what
this
they're...
man explains his mental frameworks. They seem like like if you're not doing that, an obvious implementation that would benefit you in your life. It seems like to me, right?
Days would look like.
Or am I off?
I mean, I think asking people and observing people. So people who are already doing whatever you're looking for, that's one. The best is observation, because someone's ability to communicate what they do and your ability to comprehend it is basically two filters it has to go through that are different from reality. Observation is just one. And so it's just you direct into your brain, right? And so I think observation itself is also a skill of, like, if you want to learn if I use sales a lot because it's just such an easy skill for people to understand. It's like, if I want to be the best salesperson, I can ask the best salesperson what they do, but some of the best salespeople aren't even conscious of what they do. And so observing what they do oftentimes has taught me significantly more than asking. And shoot, we have to do this with our own videos. It's like, what makes these videos better than other videos? Well, I did something differently, so let's look at what I did. And a lot of times the excellence just comes from observing random chance in a recorded setting. It's like every time we make any piece of content, anytime you have any sales call, any conversation, any presentation, any email, any whatever, you're rolling a dice where you're trying to control as many variables as you can, but there's always going to be new variables. And so when you have these kind of outliers or these above average outcomes, it's like, what was different that happened here, and how can I repeat it again? And so that's because I believe that prediction is control. And so let me hedge that. But basically, if you can absolutely predict what someone is going to do because you understand all the variables, then you control that person. So again, people don't like that. It's very no one likes the idea of being controlled, but I just like to use this as a natural hypothetical example.
It's facts. I mean,
so
you can't argue with
if I'm
that.
in an auditorium of 100 people and I'm on stage and I'm speaking, if I said, who here thinks that I can get everybody to get naked, right? Most people will probably be like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. But what you'd have to do is you would just lock all the doors, and then you'd crank the heat to 200, and people would get naked. And so if I control the variables, you control the behavior. And so trying to increase the likelihood that a certain action happens in the world is just really, how well do I understand all the variables that contribute to that outcome? And the difficulty is that there's usually just a lot of variables. And so I think mastery over time is just understanding how to influence each of the variables that increase the likelihood that the desired outcome happens. And when you have that, then people are like, man, he's so good at telling the future. This investor is so good at predicting these outcomes. It's just he has identified the vast majority of the variables that predict. And so his predictions are more accurate than other people's. And that's kind of at least how I see it. And I could be totally wrong. Let me give you something useful for everyone. So I deal with obviously a lot of employees, founders, et cetera, throughout my days. And one of the frames that comes up a lot is so-and-so isn't, doing what I want them to do, or I have to have this hard conversation with somebody. Most times people will try to have the conversation to make themselves feel better. But if we flip the question to, what would I like to have happen, number one, and then number two, what increases the likelihood that that occurs, you do a very different set of behaviors. So I'll give you an example. I had a friend of mine who's a
Excuse me.
pretty big influencer creator, whatever you want to call it. You would know they are. And she had basically a beef with a different creator who had like stolen some stuff or something like that. And so she was like, hey, what do you think I should say to this guy? And I was like, well, what do you want to have happen? And she like thought for a second and she didn't really have a clear answer. I was like, well, if I were you, I would want to decrease the likelihood this occurs in the future. Does that sound like a fair outcome? She was like, yeah. I was like, okay, well, does you yelling at him for it decrease the likelihood that occurs in the future? Or does he just do it and then he's just not friends with you? She was like, huh. And what happens is oftentimes like you go through enough of those loops and you're like, maybe I just don't really gain anything from saying anything. I'm like, yeah, probably.
Yes. If you have basically what he's saying is if you have a solid thought structure that you follow consistently, you will make better decisions in your life, which is like, yes, a lot of people don't even think in general. 100% I agree with Alex. Oh, that's how I'm interpreting it anyways, right? Because that's kind of how I see the world, just baseline.
And so I have an internal joke with my closest friend, Dr. Kashi, which is we call it the undefeated champion of the world, which is the third path, which is do nothing. And so many times, like when you run through all the scenarios, most of the times we just want to do something because we want to feel better. But it actually doesn't increase the likelihood that we want to have happens. Most times you'll just increase the likelihood for retaliation. And so me yelling at someone just increases the likelihood that they yell back at me or that they try to do something to counter control me. And so it's like, well, I would rather just like not play. This game has prizes and I don't want any of them.
When is the time to play?
When there's prizes you want to win and you think that there's a path that you have a high likelihood of winning them. My dad used to say this to me when I was really young, and I don't think I really fully grasped it until I was older. But he said, I don't play unless I know I can win. And I think part of it may be because he just didn't want to play games with me. Who knows? but that sounds ugly. No, my dad's great. But the thing that I took that like later on, and I took that as like, one, mini games are not worth playing. And two,
yes,
if you are going to play a game, understand the players and understand the rules so that you can increase the likelihood that you win, right? And if you can come into a game saying like, well, obviously there's risk that's always involved. There's things that happen, but I think from the moniker perspective of like that saying, I think I've carried that with me. Like, why would I play unless I know there's a strong chance that I can win? And if I don't think there's a strong chance that I can win, how can I increase my odds? Like what unfair advantages can I create for myself? And if I don't know it, then I don't understand the game well enough, which means I probably shouldn't play until I understand it.
I want to go back to something you said a minute before, because the last interview I asked Layla if there were any unexpected consequences of becoming famous on the internet. And she basically hinted at no, besides the hate portion. And I guess I just want to know tactfully, how do you guys get into an opportunity and have a really good idea of what it's going to look like? Because it's kind of the balancing, I'm going to have to do a lot of volume to acquire this skill, but also I kind of know what work it's going to take. Because content, or when you switched, I think you sold Allen and went to acquisition pretty quickly after. Had you just been observing like different private equity and that kind of thing?
There was a few things that kind of contributed to starting acquisition.com. One is that Layla and I had made 2 investments in 2020 prior to us selling the company at the end of 21. So we'd almost had, a year and a half where we'd made these 2 investments and they'd gone really, really well. And I was like, this is really cool. And then when we ended up going through the process of selling Allen and Prestige Labs and Gym Launch all in 2021, we dealt with a lot of private equity firms. And I remember there was a moment where I was sitting at the table and it was all of their team, the private equity team, and all of my team. And I had a few kind of like conclusions that I came away from. Number one is that their team was more talented than my team, and that's why their team was going to make more than mine. And the second was that the guy who was about to buy the business from me was going to make more money on my business than I was. And I was like, huh. And he didn't even start it or found it or know anything about gyms. And I was like, that's weird. And I was like, he has a better game. And so I was like, I should learn more about that game. And so then I spent basically all of 2021 talking to every single investor I possibly could, every person in the financial world I could get my hands on, basically, to try and understand a model that. But I was like, how do I enter that game? Because like I'm not I don't have 10 people who I know who went to Harvard and, you know, have all these banking connections. Like, I don't know any of those people.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, well, what can I do that they can't do? And I was like, I'm pretty good at marketing. And so I was like, okay, well, I did hear and I understood better that one of the things of making, you know, a good investor is being a good picker. But I could increase the likelihood that I make good picks if I just have way more to pick from. And so I was like, okay, so it's really just a marketing problem. So if I can just get more deal flow that wants to do deals with me, then I'll have a better pick, and the deals that I'll be able to negotiate will be more advantageous, even if I'm not the brightest tool in the shed. And so that was kind of...
Keeping that in mind, it explains why he went so heavy on social media, right? Heavy marketing.
Of the thesis behind it was, can we build, and to be fair, when we started, I was like, I didn't know if it was going to work. I just thought of it in likelihoods. I was like, well, there's a few need to believes. I have to believe that I can make, you know, content that will give views. So I didn't know, but I was like, I'll see. They do things. I can try and model what those people do. And, you know, the second thing that had to need to believe is, okay, if I do make content and it does work, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate to people who want to do deals with me or do business with me. So that was the second need to believe. And so those were probably like the two big ones that kind of straddled the decision overall, but they felt believable. And so I was like, worst case scenario, I'll just build an audience that doesn't generate deal flow and I'll figure something else out. But that just felt like a pretty good idea at the time, which was if you can build an audience that trusts you because of value that you've provided over an extended period of time, then I just had faith that I would figure out what to do later.
If content was your business, how would you scale?
Volume. That's what he's going to say.
Can you ask the question differently?
If you were to monetize through the content, let's just say AdSense solely, what would you be doing differently, if anything, aside from maybe just more volume?
I probably wouldn't be going after a tiny slice of a segment, which is what I go after. So business owners, it's like 9% of America owns a business. Of the 9% of America that owns a business, only 5% are over $1 million a year. Of the 5% that are over $1 million a year, well, I guess of the 9%, the 9%. So 1 out of 250 makes it to $10 million a year. 1 out of roughly 2,500 makes it to $100 million a year. So like, it's a very small slice of the pie that I make my content for. And so by its very nature, I don't get massive distribution. I get decent distribution, but not like an entertainer might. And so if I wanted to make only making money from media my own thing, then I would do super, super broad topics and things that are just human based. And I mean, that would basically
human based. Yeah.
Be it, right? You just pick a topic that transcends all races, all cultures, all people, and entertainment is the easiest one because everyone wants to laugh. Everyone wants to be distracted. And so that's why entertainers will always be bigger than educators as a category.
I mean, yeah, it's understandable. It's so much
on brand.
easier
I know
to
you've
digest,
recently, maybe not.
You know, like an entertainer like Drake or Rihanna or whatever, as opposed to a Jordan Peterson where you need to switch on your brain and actually engage in the content. So yeah, it's understandable. That's a reasonable proposition. Nice in my head.
Recently, at this point, in the past year, I kind of delved into business content to go deeper, to kind of get more deal flow for acquisition and provide more value to business owners. Do you believe it was important, though, to establish some of the other types of content you did originally around fitness, nutrition, etc.?
It's so funny because like I've only made, I think, like 3 pieces of content in total on fitness, and they still have like contributed to the overall like brand makeup. If you think about the brand as like a mosaic with lots of little pieces. But I do have some pretty updated thoughts on this, which is just, I see there's marketing and then there's personal branding, and there's an intersection between those things. And so if I only wanted to advertise for the business, then I think that I would be just fine making only content about business. But I also have a personal brand, and I want the personal brand to be as accurate a reflection of me as humanly possible. And so my measure for that is like, my mental image is like glass, which is that like if there's a glass wall and I'm on the other side and there's a room and there's all this stuff inside, but inside the glass wall is dark. I think about the content as like a flashlight that just focuses on one area of my life. Okay. And I want the flashlight basically over time to illuminate the whole room so that if someone were to walk in, they would see everything and they wouldn't be surprised. They'd be like, this is accurate. This is exactly what I expected. And to me, that's what, you know, personal branding done right is that when someone meets me in person, I'm exactly as they expected. And of course it's difficult because you can't control, even with more volume, you can't control the reach. So I know that if I make a video about a relationship, I'm going to get 10 times the views, period. If I make a video about fitness, I'm going to get 5 or 10 times the views, period, because it just affects more people. And so I have to be really careful with those pieces of content, because even if I make 1 out of 10 is fitness, it'll still look like I have a 50-50 fitness versus business brand, because I get 10 times the views, even though it's 1/10 of my volume. And so I can make very, very small percentage of content that will proportionally represent me. And I think this is kind of what the curation of a brand is, which is like trying to kind of manage it like a garden. Some weeds.
That's why he gets paid the big bucks. He understands the game to a degree that a lot of people don't even know exists. Right? Dude's like I said, a titan of the industry for sure. He's super, super cool. But I think I'm gonna leave it there. That was a good, nice 30 minutes, little section. I got shit to do, right? I'm a grown man. I do things in my life. I have to keep pushing, but let's see what peso.
Got 5 screens in your 86 Rivy. Wiggy, 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 wiggy. Then you flip Snow White quick, fast, in a jiffy. Wiggy, 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 wiggy.
I just splashed up with a chopstick. I just whacked a nigga in the project. And I'm strapped up with a kill tag. You need 50 pounds, I can mail that. I sip drink, I don't sell that. Free my niggas finna send them kill packs. Fuck the bitch now, cause I don't got pace. I done been to hell and I done shot say. You ain't about that murder, nigga, stop playing. You ain't talking money, nigga, what you